The sky recalled him. The blue bowl, rising upwards in an azure curve, smoother and rounder than perfection, was marred. A single fissure ran in a shrieking hairline crack along the face of the world, a jagged bolt of sapphire agony, laden with hints, portents, and omens. He read the truth there, blinking at the hidden oracle invisible to the blind masses. He stared, silent, watching as that streaking Cybele screened her scars, hammering him with contempt. It was nothing one could see. On the contrary, the world was perfectly ordinary. The houses lay in neat lines. The sky hung above them with the dry indigo of heavy summer. The fields radiated out in cleanly ploughed rows, artistic in their simple symmetry. In the weighted heat of the afternoon, cicadas hissed, their languid dance singing a low dirge for the lazy afternoons preceding the fall, a last quiet hum before the swollen days of autumn broke. Everything was perfect, so perfect. But above, it was there for all to see, he thought in desperation. A tilt, the slightest fraction of turning, but as blaring as a discordant note in a herald's trumpet, enough to dizzy him, and leave him reeling beneath that lovely broken sky and its connotations. As he continued to regard the desolate signs, he felt a slow rush roaring towards him. Turning, his essence swirled about him in a maelstrom of confusion and anger, and the torrent crashed, drowning him in a deluge of memory. His foul city danced in a taut across his mind. The broken stones grinned wildly at him, the empty sockets of smashed windows living above the smirk of atrophied streets. Toothless cobblestones laughed in aphonic wheezes, as with a hiss and a roar and a wail, bricks came tumbling down as swiftly as he had stacked them. A war, and everything which came with it, destruction and slaughter, and waves of death crashing against crumbling walls. He was shit, and everything he had ever made was shit. And twinning beneath it all, he felt the empty smiles of his kin, their eyes staring across the city in amusement, mirth smothered by arrogant patronization. As he gathered his tendrils of power about him, preparing to lash at them, whatever they were, the vision faded, swelling into a misty collection of faces. Mortals. Human after human parading before him, the features glared, half familiar, full rage. As they began to resolve, solidifying into accusatory stares, vague feelings tugged at him, scattering memories almost resolving into maddening near understandings. Slowly it all began to mesh, the ancient dead visages building, layer by layer, a glorious and beautiful truth. Yet he couldn't seize it. Not yet. With a mental gasp, he banished the image of his attempt, shaking his head to clear the vision of failure as the past recalled him. Yet the truth lingered. He had failed, and spite had made him do the unforgettable. An ironic term he half smiled at, for who could remember his flaws when none remembered anything? So, you are recalled now. With a hiss that was more keen than breath, the god nodded in reply to the booming thought. He hated his father. Maybe. Then petulant, always petulant. And? His thoughts sulking, he reluctantly watched the land below him. I suppose it all has to go back now. His father chuckled, laughter rolling in a gentle wave across the countryside, the soft, confident chuckle making undulating fills in the distance dance in resonance. Hardly. At least, not yet. No, our god thought, his voice lifting in confusion. No, the world is not yet ready to remember. You ensured that. But you will ensure that it will be, someday. Mentally sighing, the god-spawn grumbled to himself, summoning a wisping tendril of shadow in a sulky display, letting the misty apparition wend in the air. As he let his essence revolve into form, and a human-shaped hand solidified claw-like, with long pale fingers bent. The dusky illusion began to drift between the digits, swirling in intricate and mesmerizing patterns.
Stop that. There's work to do.
With another sigh, he banished the image, thinking with a groan. Despot.
I heard that,
his father replied, a sharp bark that set the nearby trees quivering, as several leaves shuddered and began to drift to the ground. I know, he answered, his thoughts sly and grinning. I know. Mournfully, he looked over the fields surrounding his city, his attempt at a city. Unlike the rest of the world, this region was not blissfully enjoying summer, but rather languishing in the desolate shadow of being broken. A lone farmer, the only life visible for miles, trudged along in the distance, gingerly eking an existence on the fringes of the churned and torn plain. It would all have to be fixed, he knew. The scarred and pitted battlegrounds reclaimed by the earth to host life once again. For the countless time, he felt frustration at the task before him, redoubled by the inability to call of his siblings for aid. Elsa could heal this with a snap of her fingers, he growled, his sight narrowing in irk at the barren furrows, growing, now, only a grim harvest of bleached bones and rusted weapons. But Ilsa was gone. Last he had seen her, she had been running wild as a sylph, darting among the massive trees of the elder forest, sending her powers spinning out in green trails of vibrant growth, as happy and careless as a child enraptured with spinning a top and watching it twirl. The rest were hardly much better. Split from the mortals, they spiraled off down their separate paths, increasingly focused on their own realms. Tritona never left the oceans, now, content to cavort as sea foam, immersed in the roaring swell of her own power, while Cernirnis was rumoured to be on the hunt again, leading packs in a mighty rout through the tangled jungles. Only a few felt the absence of worshippers. Orstis sat bereft and confused in a melancholy stupor, while he was maliciously gleeful to find Syl wandered aimlessly in a towering pillar of flame, occasionally conferring sadly with Hylis or Luna, the three constantly full of stern frowns and sighs as they watched the mortal coil below, uncertain what part they played. But what are we, really? The god mused one day, as he drifted through the empty, broken city he has made, finally finding an abandoned and neglected shrine, heavy with the thick dust of musted age. Without the mortals, what are we? He summoned a light wind of shadow, gathered the forces about him casually before checking the order. Perhaps this is better, he decided, banishing the power and leaving the cracked shrine silent and crumbled. Perhaps some things needed life beyond godhood. The world was broken, he knew, watching another season turn, and the mortals shamble onwards, dazed, simply living and dying. On the surface it seemed a simple wound. Restore the memory and things would be right. But beneath, he had realized, lay the true cause for the scars on the land's face. It wasn't just his fuckery, it was the faith. The wars had damaged more than the soil in the bodies of man, and giving back recollection would not change that. So he began a humble task. The Master of Shadow, Lord of Artifice, and most selfish of the gods, began to weave his most intricate tapestry yet, one which relied on being forgotten. With broad strokes and minute detail, the image took form, as he subtly began to change the bemused, lost life left in the world. To the lone farmer he brought family. It took years, dozens, but he eventually realized that love couldn't exist in a world without identity. But nor could displacement and loss, for who could mourn change when there was no original to mourn missing? A simple and painless task, then, to pluck a woman up and place her nearby, assuring her remotely, through vacant false memory, that this was her home. A gentle nudge to the farmer's unconscious, and soon they had met. and soon after together with children. A village began to grow, weakly, next to the forgotten city. Their children met a god, but only thought themselves strong and brave and bold, chasing off wolves. And they told stories, and the huntress that inspired began to build the village beyond just a place where people simply existed to survive. It would be so much easier if I could just tell them, show them. But always his father.
They must learn themselves.
Piece by piece he began to smooth the land, acting through the community rapidly forming at the base of the broken city. The battlefield began to sink back into the earth, as the ghastly furrows began to straighten into neatly ploughed lines, and one day, green emerged. Granted, it was pallid and sickly, and the crops were stunted, but it was a start. For him, the master of warped and broken creations, it was a victory, the first thing he had ever truly created. As the seasons passed, the mortals began to grow stronger. No longer disoriented and puzzled, they began to build lives out of the world around them. Identities slowly blossomed, rooted in the sky, lakes and fields, seated in the mending of the land. They created lives, and those lives created lives, and in all of those lives there was hope.
It is nearly time.
Yes, father, they are ready.
You know they will forget this, that all they will remember is a haze of confusion. All they will know is that they were made to forget, but that they recalled in the end.
It was not a question, but a statement of truth. I know.
They will know you for only part of yourself, the darkest part, the part which made the world forget.
I know.
And you will not be a hero. You will not be adored.
His father's stern thought sent ripples skittering across the lake between them, as the elder god puzzled over this subdued reply. His son had changed, or was planning something dire.
You will be the artificer, and reviled by many as a breaker of the land.
I know.
Things will change. It is time for us to return to the minds of women and men. I will lift the veil soon.
Pausing, the elder god considered, as time seemed to hold his breath. The clouds in the sky drifted in place, while the birds wheeling overhead froze for a moment.
Your work is done. You will go back to being simply what I have named you. The failure.
I know, he answered, his thoughts sly and grinning. I know.